speaker? Ms. Cohen?
There's still a bunch of people arguing, so I didn't know if I.
Okay, our Zoom is up, so are we good? Okay, so
We
we are
are clear.
starting again. Ms. Omesh was speaking. She's currently away from the table. So I have Ms. Cohen as our next speaker.
Hi. I just wanted to speak as a current high school parent here, which is, I think that many of us, when your kid is in high school, your assumption is that they're being graded in the same way that the school across the street and the school in Mason District and the school over in Providence, because at the end of the day, our kids are all applying to the same schools, right? Like, as the mom of a junior, I guess I'm going to say that it's disappointing to know that there are kids trying to get into the same schools with very disparate grading policies and have had them changed multiple times throughout their tenure. We were one of those families that started elementary school one way and then went to the 4-point scale in elementary school. And, I guess my frustration is I think there was a real understanding that we had been on a 100-point grading scale. We had the work session several years ago, expressed extreme frustration that we wouldn't all be on. I think many of us just said, pick one, but this is unreasonable. And what was happening is that in multiple places, and I will say particularly in special ed, that our special ed kids were in classes that were using a 4-point grading scale while their same-aged peers were in classes on a 100-point scale. This is really about as inequitable as it comes when we talk to this. I agree that I think there's an opportunity. I think that's the point of the working committee, is to come back to the board and potentially talk about some thoughts as we move forward. My hope is that the work becomes more the product. I hope that's the kind of grading that we're talking about, is how to measure knowledge instead of rote memorization and recall. That's what I thought when we were talking about grading policy, is how do we move forward into a 22nd century world. And so, to me, I think this is just codifying what you agreed to, which was a 100-point scale, so that everybody knows it, everybody sees it. I'm, in fairness, slightly disappointed that we let folks have a whole nother year. That's a whole nother year that our kids are having very disparate grading policies. But I understand also that you're, not trying to blow up the system in your first 2.5 seconds here, and I understand that completely. So I defer that to you, which is why I think that's what we do. We defer how this is implemented in the very capable hands of Dr. Reed, who's done this a whole lot more times than I ever have. So I assume that you know what you're doing. So I would like for us to give you a very clear guidance, which is what you tell us all the time. And so I support this wholeheartedly. We need to just have the same thing that is in practice everywhere, and then we get to move together as a system, you guys who are left do, about how we move together once we are all starting from the same place. That's why I support it.
Ms. Tolan, if it's okay.
I'm sorry, did you finish?
No, I didn't even start.
Okay.
All right.
We got cut off.
I just wanted to call the question, so I'm
Okay,
just
then I'm
gonna
definitely
do
taking
it.
my turn. Okay. All right, so Dr. Reed, could this be benefited from a delay where principals are brought on board, we start at the following year, quarters? Part of the question in my mind too is, like, if you're going to implement this immediately, the 2 quarters for kids have already been graded a certain way. You're going to have the next 2 graded a different way.
She's saying it would be the fall.
Oh, it would be the fall. Okay, then that's even better. Sorry, So in that case, okay, I think, Melanie did raise valid concerns of it is a little bit strange to adopt something without robust conversation, work session, et cetera, to evaluate possibilities. And while I do think the 100-point grade scale is better than the 4.0 one, that doesn't mean that the 100 one is the ideal one. So that I think that that's also a place for further conversation, research-based, thoughtful, to determine what the best plan for FCPS is. I want to propose, I don't know if this is going to help us or hurt us, but if there's objection, let me hear it. I'm hoping there isn't any, but I move to amend, to just add to the end there, to be effective at the start of the following school year and to be subject to further evaluation by the board as deemed necessary.
Point of order, a very gentle point of order. It would have to be a follow-on motion because the policy would, then it would only, the policy lives, that sentence would live with the policy, which would mean that each year it's saying it's next year. So it has to be a follow-on motion.
Or I can put a date to be effective September or August 2024. Right? Or yeah, I think that would resolve that. Yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay. All right, Christina, apologies. I'm going to move to add a follow-on motion.
After.
All right, but then for some people, they're not going to be able to vote on this without that piece, I think. So that's what I want to be clear on. Like, if the motion passes in lieu of that follow-on, we're going to be in a, I think, problematic place. So I guess I'm trying to figure out my options. Would it be possible to move to have the follow-on voted for first?
No.
No, we need to do the main motion first.
Would you like to call the question, Ms. Amish?
I know that's
Ms. Amish, would you like to call the question?
I would like to, I did.
And I'll second that.
Okay,
Sure, I'll call the question, and I'm going to respectfully name from now that should the follow-on not pass, I'm going to respectfully request that my vote be amended on the previous motion.
thank you. Okay, the motion is on the screen. I would like to call for the vote on the motion on the screen. All those. We have to vote.
Without objection, let's end debate. Anyone object to ending debate? Phil, okay. All right, so I move to call the question. Is there a second?
Let Elaine
Yes.
to the meeting.
Okay, the question has been called. All those in favor of calling the question? Okay, we have Ms. Corbett Sanders, Dr. Anderson, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Annette Kofax, Ms. Wakarski, Ms. Tolan, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Karen Keys-Gamara, Ms. Omesh, Ms. Cohen, and Ms. Rajna Seisler-Heiser. All those opposed? Ms. Marin? Okay, so the question, that motion passes. Now we will move, yes, we will vote on the motion on the screen. All those in favor of the motion on the screen? Okay, Ms. Corbett Sanders, Dr. Anderson, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Annette Kofax, Ms. Karski, Ms. Tolan, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Keys-Gamara. Ms. Omesh, is your hand up? Yeah. Thank you. Ms. Cohen and Ms. Rochester-Heiser, those opposed. Ms. Marin. Okay, that motion passes. Ms. Omesh.
Okay, I'd like to move to amend the policy, or no, so that the policy is effective August. Yeah, it's a follow-on motion. That's fine. I'm moving.
A following motion.
Right. I move, oh my goodness. All right, I move to direct the superintendent, no. I move to have the aforementioned policy adopted effective the following school year, August 2024, and to be subject to further evaluation by the board as deemed necessary.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Frisch. Ms. Omesh, do you want to speak to that?
I want to be very clear, the intent is clear, we've discussed this already. The idea is to have a very clear effective date. Ms. Marin did point to a clear example of where this was a little bit sloppy, so this will be clear for everyone. And that gives Dr. Reed the opportunity to work with principals, to train, whatever is necessary to get everyone on the same page to be adopting this by that year. I think we all know why this matters.
Mr. Frisch, would you like to speak to your second?
Very briefly, I think it makes sense to say this policy is in effect. It aligns with the superintendent's guidance to our schools that it would be in effect for the next school year. And all of our policies are always open to discretion of the board at any time. So I have no problem with that piece of the motion. And I think it would be great if we passed this follow-on motion expeditiously.
Board members, I have lots of lights on, and I'm not sure they're all up to date. Ms. McLaughlin, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I mean, unlike the trust policy that Dr. Anderson cited earlier as an example, that was a brand new policy that required training and implementation, and so it needed some time for implementing it into our schools. This is a sitting and existing policy that was first written in 1986, and it's been revised and updated along the way. All we did was add a new section, section 5, 2 sentences long. That's it. So if we pass this follow-on motion, it makes this entire policy then not in effect. As I'm reading this, it's saying I move the aforementioned policy. So it makes the entire policy not, well, then it would need to say I move to have section 5 be effective. So I guess, Mr. Frisch, what I would say is if you want to say without objection and of this policy, whatever, be effective August 24. My problem with the second phrase is we don't ever talk about whether or not it now has to be subject to further evaluation by the board as deemed necessary. I mean, at any point in time, the board can undertake that work. So I guess what I would have concerns about is our teachers and our families do not want a grading scale to be a yo-yo. So that would be my only concern on how this language is reading. So I guess I would just like a little clarity on that. If it's because we have talked about the merits, that there is a whole lot related to grading practices that needs to be in a more comprehensive grading policy, then I'm comfortable with the follow-on motion. So if either maker could just clarify that for me, is it that we're just talking about wanting to refine and enhance a grading policy as opposed to you're trying to reopen the debate again on grading scale? Because I think that is a whole nother serious ball game.
No, I think that that second portion doesn't actually change anything really. It's a nod to the conversation that's been had of concerns of wanting to look at it and discuss it and whatnot, right? Because this feels a little bit rushed. So it's really just meant to acknowledge that line of conversation that occurred.
Okay. I will watch as a private citizen and hope we only get better in terms of collaboration between the board and the superintendent, the division, and I will put in my plug to the next board that I fully support this collaboration. Dr. Presidio's committee that he's worked with I truly wish we had had that first year's report be in a work session and presented to the board. I think we might have found ourselves in a different conversation here tonight. And while I do have the moment, Dr. Reed, I want to thank you again for your continued steady leadership on this issue. I really appreciate the thinking you bring to this.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Dr. Anderson, did you have an additional comment?
No, I just have a motion to make when it's time.
Ms. Corbett Sanders, are you speaking to this motion?
Actually, what I'm going to suggest is that the second phrase, "and be subject to further evaluation by the board as deemed necessary," is really pertinent to the conversation regarding the other work of the grading working group. And so I know that Dr. Anderson had a follow-on motion that she suggested that would capture just that piece. So my suggestion would be to actually stop this follow-on motion put a period after August 2024, and then have the second follow-on motion, which actually requires without objection, I would like to hear the second follow-on motion added to it so that we see the full picture rather than this piece part here. So I'm going to ask Dr. Anderson if the chair allows for her to read what she has. Thank you.
So there was no objection to putting a period after 2024.
And deleting the rest. Okay.
And I've sent the language to the clerk.
Okay, so we are deleting the part that says "and."
Right, so put a period right there and delete that, but then we need to vote on this.
And the second follow-on language.
The second follow-on motion has been sent to the clerk, and it's fairly brief. It's to direct the superintendent to share the findings of the grading working group in a work session for further evaluation.
Okay, so, all right, Madam Clerk, you have that? Okay, we will go back to this first follow-on motion then and vote on that. The motion.
Did anyone second? I'll
the
second
follow-on
that.
motion is on the screen.
Oh, hers.
Okay, so let's vote on the first follow-on. All those in favor? Ms. Corbett Sanders, Dr. Anderson, Mr. Kofax, Ms. Tolan, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Omesh. Those opposed? Those abstaining? Ms. Marin? Ms. Sutlow? Do we have two? Okay, so that motion passes. Let's move on to the second follow-on motion. The follow-on motion is on the screen.
I think
We
it
need
needs to
a
be
second.
properly seconded.
We need a second. So Dr. Anderson has a follow-on motion. Is there a second for this follow-on motion? Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Dr. Anderson, do you want to speak any further? Ms. Keys-Gamarra? Okay, let's vote on this second follow-on motion. All those in favor? Ms. Corbett Sanders, Dr. Anderson, Ms. McLaughlin, Mr. Kofax, Ms. Tolan, Mr. Frisch, Ms. Keys-Gamarra, Ms. Marin, and Ms. Omesh. That motion passes. All right. We are moving on to our consent agenda. Our adopted rules of parliamentary procedure, Robert's rules, provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board by a single motion. Many items listed have gone through board review, and documentation has been provided to all board members and the public in advance. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member prior to the meeting. The consent agenda items are on the screen. Is there any objection to approving the consent agenda? Hearing and seeing no objection, the consent agenda is approved. The following are new business agenda items. There will not be a vote on these items this evening, but action is scheduled at a future meeting. The new business items are on the screen. We have no board committee reports this evening. Thank you for joining us. Can I just speak? Thank you for joining us. The next regular meeting will be held on January 11th, 2024. The board will now reconvene its closed session.